The vast darkness of space stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by the cold light of distant stars. In this emptiness, a sight that would have terrified any civilized species slowly came into view. Ships, thousands upon thousands, of alien vessels moving together like a metal storm across the galaxy. The Kethran Empire's war fleet was massive beyond imagination. 100,000 ships of various sizes spread across space in perfect formation. Small fighter craft buzzed around enormous battleships like angry insects. Massive carriers held even more vessels in their bellies, ready to release death upon any world that dared to resist. At the center of this metal ocean floated the flagship Dominator. Its black hull was covered in weapon ports and armor plating, thick enough to stop nuclear weapons. Inside the ship's command center, Admiral Vex stood before a wall of screens showing his endless fleet. His 6 arms moved across control panels, while his 4 eyes scanned the data flowing past him. "Admiral," called out his communication officer, a younger Kethran with nervous movements, "we are approaching the human sector. Our scouts report a small colony on the 3rd planet of this system." Vex's mouth twisted into what his species considered a smile. "Humans," he said with disgust. "Such a young race. They have been in space for less than 300 of their years. Their weapons are primitive. Their ships are slow. This will not even be a proper battle." The Admiral had studied the reports about humanity. They were a species that seemed to prefer trade over war. Their colonies were small and peaceful. Their military was tiny compared to the great empires of the galaxy. Most importantly, they had never faced a real threat. The Kethran Empire had conquered over 200 species. Humans would be number 201. "Sir," another officer spoke up, "our forward scouts are detecting something unusual." "What is it?" Vex asked, not really interested. Nothing these primitive humans had could surprise him. "There is a single ship between our fleet and the human colony. It appears to be damaged and drifting without power." This got the Admiral's attention. He moved to the main display screen and saw the image his scouts were sending back. There, floating alone in the darkness, was a human vessel. It was much smaller than even his smallest destroyer, painted in dark gray that almost made it invisible against space. The ship looked battered, with scorch marks on its hull and no lights visible through its windows. "One ship?" Vex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "One damaged ship stands against my entire fleet? What do they call this vessel?" The scanner operator checked his readings. "The name painted on the hull reads Reaper, sir." "Reaper," Vex repeated the human word slowly. "How appropriate. It will soon learn what death truly means." Inside the human ship, Captain Jake Morrison sat alone on the bridge. The lights were dimmed to almost nothing, and most of the control panels showed red warning lights. Jake was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of military service. His uniform was simple blue fabric, nothing like the elaborate armor worn by alien commanders, but Jake's eyes were calm. Too calm for a man facing impossible odds. "Ghost," he said quietly to the empty bridge. "Are you ready?" A soft voice answered him, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "All systems are online, Captain. The evacuation of Terra Nova colony is complete. The Reaper is operating at full capacity despite external appearances." Jake nodded. Ghost was the ship's artificial intelligence, more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The AI could think faster than any biological mind and control every system on the Reaper simultaneously. "How many ships are we facing?" Jake asked. "Exactly. 147 vessels of various classes," Ghost replied. The Kethran appear confident in their numerical advantage. Jake almost smiled. They should be. In any normal situation, they would be right. The captain stood up and walked to the main window of the bridge. Outside, he could see the approaching alien fleet. Ships stretched from one edge of his vision to the other, their weapon ports glowing with deadly energy. Any sane person would have run away or surrendered immediately. Jake Morrison was not most people. He had commanded the Reaper for 5 years, but he had never been allowed to use its full capabilities. The ship was humanity's most classified secret, built with technology that even Earth scientists did not completely understand. It had been designed for one purpose: to face threats that should have been impossible to defeat. "Ghost, open a channel to the Kethron fleet," Jake ordered. "Channel? Open, Captain." Jake's voice was broadcast across space to every ship in the alien Armada. "Kethron fleet, this is Captain Morrison of the Earth vessel Reaper. You are approaching a human colony. Turn around and leave this system immediately." On the flagship, Admiral Vex heard the transmission and laughed so hard his officers looked uncomfortable. "Did you hear that?" he called out to his bridge crew. "One human in one broken ship is ordering us to leave." The Admiral activated his own communication system. "Human Captain, I am Admiral Vex of the Kethron Empire. You are facing 100,000 ships of war. Surrender now, and we will make your death quick." Jake's reply was immediate and calm. "I gave you a chance to leave peacefully. You chose not to take it." "What can one ship do against my fleet?" Vex demanded. "Let me show you," Jake said simply. The captain walked back to his command chair and placed his hand on a panel that had been dark until now. The panel scanned his palm, recognized his identity, and activated systems that had been sleeping since the Reaper was built. Across the ship, hidden machinery came to life. The hull began to change color from dull gray to a deep black that seemed to absorb light itself. Weapon ports opened along the ship's surface, revealing technology that looked nothing like human engineering. Energy began to flow through circuits made from materials that did not exist anywhere else in the galaxy. The Kethron sensors immediately detected the change. Warning alarms began sounding on every ship in their fleet as their instruments registered energy readings that should have been impossible. "What is happening?" Admiral Vex demanded. "What are those readings?" His science officer, a nervous creature with shaking hands, checked his instruments 3 times before answering. "Sir, the human ship is generating power levels equivalent to a small star. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases." Vex stared at the Reaper on his main screen. The small human vessel no longer looked damaged or helpless. It looked dangerous in a way that made his survival instincts scream warnings. "Impossible," he whispered. "They are a primitive species. Their technology is centuries behind ours." But even as he spoke, Vex knew something was terribly wrong. The Kethron Empire had never encountered a ship that could generate such massive amounts of power. Their own largest battleships would have been destroyed instantly if they tried to channel that much energy through their systems. "Admiral," his weapons officer called out, "should we attack?" Vex hesitated for the first time in his military career. Every instinct told him that the small human ship was somehow more dangerous than it appeared, but he had 100,000 vessels under his command. No single ship, no matter how advanced, could possibly stand against such overwhelming numbers. "All ships," he ordered, "target the human vessel. Fire a warning shot. Show them the power of the Kethron Empire." 50 of his destroyers turned their main guns toward the Reaper and fired simultaneously. Beams of pure energy, each one capable of melting through a mountain, struck the human ship from all directions. The weapons hit their target perfectly. For a moment, the Reaper was surrounded by explosions bright enough to light up the entire system. When the light faded, the human ship was completely undamaged. Jake's voice came across the communication channel again, still calm, still confident. "Is that the best you can do?" Admiral Vex stared at his screens in shock. 50 direct hits from destroyer-class weapons had not even scratched the human vessel's hull. The Reaper floated in space as if nothing had happened at all. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Jake Morrison stood up from his command chair and looked out at the massive alien fleet surrounding his ship. He had hoped they would listen to reason and leave peacefully. Now there was only one option left. "Ghost," he said quietly, "activate all weapons systems. It's time to show them what human engineering can really do." "Weapons online, Captain," Ghost replied. "Shall I begin with the entropy cannon?" "Yes," Jake said. "Let's make this educational." The silence that followed the failed attack was deafening. Across the Kethron fleet, thousands of alien warriors stared at their screens in disbelief. Their most powerful weapons had struck the human ship directly, yet it floated in space without a single scratch on its dark hull. Admiral Vex felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest. Fear. His 4 eyes remained fixed on the Reaper as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The small human vessel should have been nothing but floating debris by now. "Science officer," he barked. "Explain to me how that ship survived." The nervous Kethran checked his instruments again, his hands shaking as he worked. "Admiral, our sensors show the human ship absorbed all the energy from our weapons. It did not deflect the attacks or use shields to block them. It simply absorbed the energy completely." "That is impossible," Vex growled. "No material in the galaxy can absorb that much energy without being destroyed." "Sir," another officer interrupted, "the human ship is powering up some kind of weapon system. Energy readings are climbing beyond our measurement capabilities." On the bridge of the Reaper, Jake Morrison stood calmly before the main control panel. His fingers moved across controls that looked deceptively simple, but each button controlled technology that had taken humanity's best scientists 50 years to develop. "Ghost," he said quietly. "Target the nearest cluster of destroyers. Make it clean." "Targeting 17 vessels in formation Delta 7, the AI replied. "Entropy cannon. Charged and ready to fire." Jake paused for a moment, thinking about the aliens he was about to kill. He felt no anger toward them, no hatred. But they had chosen to threaten human civilians, and that could not be allowed. His finger pressed down on the firing control. The Reaper's main weapon did not fire a beam of light or a projectile like normal ship weapons. Instead, it released something far more terrifying. A pulse that traveled at the speed of light and affected matter at the most basic level possible. The pulse reached the 17 Kethran destroyers instantly. For a split second, nothing seemed to happen. Then the ship simply began to fall apart. Not exploding, not burning, but dissolving as the molecular bonds holding their hulls together stopped working. Admiral Vex watched in horror as 17 of his most powerful warships turned into clouds of loose atoms floating in space. The crews inside never had time to scream. One moment they were alive and preparing for battle. The next moment they no longer existed. "What kind of weapon was that?" he whispered. His science officer was frantically checking readings, his voice high with panic. "Admiral, the human weapon appears to have disrupted the atomic structure of our ships. It made their matter come apart at the molecular level." The communication channel crackled to life again. Jake Morrison's calm voice filled the bridge of every Kethran ship. "You have seen what one shot from my weapon can do. I am giving you one final chance to leave this system. Take your fleet and go home." Admiral Vex felt his pride burning inside his chest. He was the greatest military commander in Kethran history. He had conquered entire star systems and brought dozens of species under the Empire's control. He would not be intimidated by one human in one ship, no matter how advanced their weapons might be. "All ships," he commanded across the fleet communication system. "Concentrate fire on the human vessel. Every ship, every weapon. Destroy it now." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Nearly 100,000 alien warships turned their weapons toward the Reaper. The space around the human vessel lit up like a new star as thousands of energy beams, missiles, and projectile weapons struck it from every direction. The attack continued for 30 seconds. When it finally stopped, the Reaper remained exactly where it had been, completely undamaged. But now something new was happening to the human ship. Small objects began to separate from the Reaper's hull. At first they looked like debris, but as they moved away from the main ship, their true nature became clear. They were fighter craft, but unlike any fighters the Kethran had ever seen. The human drones were sleek and black, about the size of the aliens' own fighters but moving with impossible speed and precision. They did not launch from bays or hangars like normal fighters. Instead, they seemed to phase into existence directly from the ship's hull, appearing out of nowhere like ghosts. "Ghost," Jake said as he watched the drones deploy. "How many can we field?" "Current manufacturing capacity allows for continuous production of 1,200 drone fighters," the AI replied. "Each drone carries the equivalent firepower of a destroyer-class vessel." Jake nodded. The drones were another piece of technology that even he did not fully understand. They were built using matter manipulation technology that could create complex machines from raw materials in seconds. Each drone was controlled by a fragment of Ghost's artificial intelligence, making them faster and more accurate than any biological pilot could ever be. The Kethran fleet watched in growing fear as the human drones spread out across space. There were not many of them compared to the aliens' vast numbers, but something about the way they moved made experienced warriors nervous. They flew in perfect formation without any communication, turning and diving as if they shared a single mind. Admiral, his tactical officer called out. The human fighters are approaching our outer ships. Should we launch our own fighters to intercept? Yes, Vex ordered. Launch all fighters. Show these humans that numbers matter more than technology. Thousands of Kethran fighter craft poured out of the fleet's carriers. They outnumbered the human drones by more than 10 to 1 and moved to surround them completely. The alien pilots were confident in their skills and eager to prove themselves against the mysterious human technology. The battle began as soon as the two forces met. It was over in less than 5 minutes. The human drones moved through the Kethran fighters like a hot knife through ice. Their weapons were precise and deadly, each shot destroying an enemy fighter with no wasted energy. But more terrifying was their speed and coordination. They moved in patterns that seemed to predict what the alien pilots would do before the pilots themselves knew. Every time a group of Kethran fighters tried to surround a human drone, they found themselves flying into carefully planned ambushes. The drones would disappear and reappear in different locations, using some kind of short-range teleportation technology that made them nearly impossible to target. Within minutes, thousands of alien fighters were destroyed while not a single human drone was even damaged. Admiral Vex watched the slaughter with growing desperation. How are they doing this? He demanded. How can so few fighters defeat so many? His tactical officer was studying the battle data, trying to understand what he was seeing. Admiral, the human drones appear to be sharing information instantaneously. They are not fighting as individual craft, but as a single unit with multiple bodies. Our pilots cannot match their coordination. The human drones finished destroying the last of the Kethran fighters and began moving toward the main fleet. Their weapons were small compared to the battleships they were approaching, but after what Vex had already seen, he was no longer confident. That size mattered. Jake Morrison's voice came across the communication channel again. Admiral Vex, you have now lost 17 destroyers and approximately 8,000 fighter craft. Your remaining ships can leave this system safely if you withdraw now. Vex was breathing heavily, his 4 eyes wide with a mixture of fear and rage. Everything he thought he knew about warfare was being proven wrong by this single human ship, but he still had nearly 100,000 vessels under his command. Surely that had to count for something. Human captain, he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. You may have superior technology, but you are still just one ship. We will overwhelm you through sheer numbers. You cannot fight us all. You are welcome to try, Jake replied calmly. Admiral Vex looked around his bridge at his officers. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders. Some looked frightened, others confused. All of them were beginning to doubt whether their massive fleet could win this battle. But Vex was the admiral of the Kethran Empire's greatest war fleet. He would not retreat from a single enemy ship, no matter how dangerous it appeared. All vessels, he commanded. Close formation and advance on the human ship. We will ram it if necessary. No single vessel can stand against the combined mass of our entire fleet. As his order was carried out, Vex wondered if he was making the right choice. But it was too late to change his mind now. The battle would continue, and one way or another, it would end soon. Admiral Vex stood on his command bridge, watching his massive fleet move into attack formation. The sight should have filled him with confidence. Nearly 100,000 warships advancing together was a force that could destroy entire planets. Yet somehow, looking at the single human vessel floating calmly in space ahead of them, he felt only growing dread. Admiral, his intelligence officer called out urgently. I have been reviewing our files on the human species. There are some disturbing facts we may have overlooked. What kind of facts? Vex demanded, not taking his eyes off the Reaper. The intelligence officer's hands trembled as he read from his data pad. Sir, our initial reports focused on human trade colonies and peaceful settlements. But I have found military records that paint a very different picture of this species. Explain quickly, Vex ordered as his fleet continued to close the distance to the human ship. Admiral, humans have been at war with each other for their entire recorded history. Not occasional conflicts like most species, but constant, continuous warfare spanning thousands of years. They have fought wars using everything from simple clubs to weapons that can destroy entire cities. Vex felt his stomach tighten. Continue. Their planet Earth has never known true peace, sir. While other species were learning to work together, humans were perfecting the art of killing each other. They have created weapons designed to destroy their own kind by the millions. The Admiral turned away from the main screen to look at his officer. Are you saying we underestimated their military capabilities? Sir, I am saying we may have made a terrible mistake. The reports show that humans do not build weapons to fight equals. They build weapons to fight enemies who are stronger, faster, and more numerous than themselves. Every human military technology was designed with the assumption that they would be the weaker force in any conflict. On the bridge of the Reaper, Jake Morrison was having a very different conversation with his AI companion. Ghost, he said quietly. Show me the tactical analysis of their fleet. The main display screen lit up with a detailed view of the approaching Kethron Armada. Red markers appeared over dozens of ships, highlighting structural weaknesses and critical systems that Ghost had identified. Captain, the AI said in its calm, mechanical voice, the Kethran vessels are built for overwhelming enemies through superior numbers. Their individual ships are heavily armed but not heavily armored. They expect to win battles quickly through coordinated attacks. What are their weaknesses? Jake asked. Their formation tactics require ships to stay close together for maximum firepower. This makes them vulnerable to area effect weapons. Additionally, their power systems are not shielded against electromagnetic interference. Their ships rely on constant communication with their command vessel to maintain coordination. Jake nodded slowly. So if we disrupt their communications and hit them with the right kind of weapon, their formation would collapse into chaos and individual ships would become easy targets, Ghost confirmed. Jake walked to his weapons control station. The Reaper had dozens of different weapon systems, each one designed for a specific type of combat situation. He had used the entropy cannon to make a point, but now it was time to show the aliens what human military engineering could really accomplish. Ghost, charge the reality bomb, he ordered. Captain, are you certain? That weapon has never been tested in actual combat conditions. I am certain, Jake replied firmly. Target the center of their formation. We are going to turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Back on the Kethran flagship, Admiral Vex was receiving more disturbing reports from his intelligence team. Sir, the officer continued reading, human military doctrine is based on something they call total war. When humans fight, they do not seek honor or glory. They seek complete victory by any means necessary. They are willing to sacrifice anything to ensure their enemies are completely destroyed. Impossible, Vex muttered. No civilized species fights that way. Sir, according to these records, humans once fought a war that lasted 6 years and killed over 50 million of their own people. They created weapons that could poison entire continents and bombs that could level entire cities. They only stopped when one side was completely unable to continue fighting. Vex felt ice forming in his veins. How long ago was this war? Less than 100 years ago, sir. By galactic standards, it was yesterday. The Admiral looked back at the human ship on his screen. Suddenly, the Reaper did not look like the vessel of a peaceful species. It looked like exactly what it was, a weapon built by creatures who had spent millennia learning how to kill efficiently. Admiral, his communication officer interrupted. We are receiving another transmission from the human captain. Put it through, Vex ordered. Jake Morrison's voice filled the bridge once again, but this time there was something different in his tone. It was still calm, but now there was an edge of steel beneath the words. Admiral Vex, Jake said, I want you to understand something. You think you are facing a primitive species with inferior technology. You are wrong. You are facing a species that has never known peace. Every weapon on this ship was designed by people who spent their entire lives thinking about how to destroy enemies who outnumber them. The human captain paused, letting his words sink in. We do not build ships to fight fair battles, Admiral. We build ships to win unfair battles. We build them assuming that we will be outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy who is stronger than us in every way. The Reaper was not designed to fight other human ships. It was designed to fight gods. Admiral Vex felt his confidence crumbling. What do you want, he asked. I want you to take your fleet and leave this system, Jake replied. I want you to go back to your empire and tell them that humans are not prey. We are predators who have been pretending to be sheep because we thought it would be better for everyone that way. And if we refuse? Jake's reply was immediate and chilling. Then I will show you why my species conquered our own planet before we ever left it. The Reaper began to change again. Its hull shifted from black to a deep red color that seemed to pulse with inner light. New weapon ports opened along its surface, revealing technology that looked nothing like the devices the Kethran recognized as weapons. Ghost, Jake said quietly. Activate the reality bomb. Target the center of their formation. Reality bomb armed and ready, the AI confirmed. Warning, this weapon will create a localized space-time distortion. The effects may be unpredictable. Fire. The Reaper released its most devastating weapon. Unlike the entropy cannon, which affected matter at the molecular level, the reality bomb affected space itself. A sphere of twisted space-time expanded from the human ship, moving outward at incredible speed. When the distortion reached the Kethran fleet, physics itself seemed to break down. Ships that had been moving forward suddenly found themselves moving backward. Vessels that were flying in formation crashed into each other as up and down became meaningless concepts. The tightly packed alien armada turned into a chaotic mess of spinning, colliding ships. Admiral Vex watched in horror as his perfectly organized fleet tore itself apart. Ships designed to work together in close formation became death traps as the reality bomb turned their coordination into catastrophe. Damage report, he shouted over the sounds of alarms and emergency broadcasts. Admiral, his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking. We have lost over 30,000 ships. They were not destroyed by enemy fire. They were destroyed by colliding with each other when the space distortion hit our formation. Vex stared at the chaos on his screens. In less than 1 minute, the human ship had eliminated nearly 1/3 of his fleet without firing a single conventional weapon. The aliens had not been outgunned or outmaneuvered. They had been outsmarted by an enemy who understood warfare in ways they never imagined. Sir, his communication officer called out, we are receiving emergency signals from ships throughout the fleet. Many captains are requesting permission to retreat. Admiral Vex looked at the Reaper floating calmly in the middle of the destruction it had caused. The human ship was completely undamaged, while his once mighty armada was in ruins. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Vex began to consider the possibility that he might lose this battle. Human captain, he said into his communication system, what are you? Jake Morrison's reply came back immediately, and the words would haunt the Admiral's dreams for the rest of his life. We are what happens when a species spends 10,000 years learning how to kill each other, and then decides to work together instead. Admiral Vex stood among the wreckage of his pride. The command bridge of his flagship was filled with the sounds of emergency alarms and panicked voices reporting massive casualties. Through the main viewing screen, he could see the twisted remains of thousands of his ships floating in space like broken toys. The human vessel Reaper sat in the center of the destruction, completely untouched. Its dark red hull pulsed with energy that made Vex's eyes hurt to look at directly. In less than an hour, this single enemy ship had reduced his mighty fleet from 100,000 vessels to fewer than 70,000. Admiral, his chief tactical officer approached with visible fear in his movements. The captains are requesting immediate retreat. Many ships are already preparing to jump to hyperspace without orders. Vex slammed his 6 fists on the command console. No, I will not be defeated by one primitive human ship. We still outnumber them 70,000 to 1. That has to count for something. His science officer looked up from his instruments with shaking hands. Sir, I have been analyzing the human weapons. Each one operates on principles that should be impossible. They are not just advanced technology. They are using physics that we do not understand. Explain, Vex demanded. The first weapon dissolved our ships at the molecular level. The second weapon manipulated space and time itself. Admiral, this is not merely superior technology. This is technology that treats the fundamental laws of reality as suggestions rather than rules. Vex turned to stare at the Reaper again. The human captain had been silent since the reality bomb attack, but somehow that silence was more frightening than any threat. What was the human planning next? On the bridge of the Reaper, Jake Morrison was studying tactical displays showing the remaining Kethran fleet. The aliens had spread their ships out to avoid another formation-destroying attack, but this had made them vulnerable in different ways. Ghost, he said quietly. Analysis of their current position? The Kethran have learned from our previous attacks, the AI replied. They are maintaining distance from each other and moving in unpredictable patterns. However, their scattered formation has reduced their combined firepower and made communication between ships more difficult. Jake nodded. What about their morale? Intercepted. Communication suggests that panic is spreading through their fleet. Many ship captains are questioning Admiral Vex's orders. The alien fleet is beginning to fracture psychologically as well as physically. Good, Jake said. But they still have the numbers to overwhelm us if they coordinate properly. We need to end this before they figure out a new strategy. Ghost paused for a moment, processing millions of calculations. Captain, I have detected something concerning. The Kethran flagship is charging what appears to be a planet-killing weapon. Their target seems to be the Terra Nova colony. Jake felt ice form in his stomach. They are going to hold the colonists hostage. It appears. So, Captain, Admiral Vex may be planning to force us into a vulnerable position by threatening civilian lives. Jake's face hardened. The Kethran admiral had just made a fatal mistake. Threatening human civilians was the one thing guaranteed to make Jake abandon all restraint. Ghost, he said in a voice cold as deep space. Activate the phase shift drive. It is time to show them our final surprise. Admiral Vex watched his weapons officers prepare the World Breaker, the Kethran Empire's most powerful weapon. The massive cannon could crack a planet's surface and kill every living thing on it within hours. It was meant to be used only as a last resort, but these were desperate times. Human Captain, he broadcast on all frequencies. I am targeting your colony world with our planet destroyer. Surrender yourself or watch millions of your people die. The response came back immediately, but Jake Morrison's voice had changed completely. Gone was the calm, professional tone. Now there was something in the human's voice that made Vex's survival instincts scream warnings. Admiral, Jake said, and each word seemed to carry the weight of a death sentence. You have just made the last mistake you will ever make. The Reaper began to change in ways that defied everything the Kethran knew about physics. The ship's solid hull started to become transparent, like a ghost fading from reality. Then it began to flicker, existing and not existing in rapid succession. What is happening to their ship? Vex demanded. His science officer stared at his instruments in complete confusion. Admiral, according to our sensors, the human vessel is existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It is phasing in and out of our reality. That is impossible. Sir, the readings are clear. The human ship is now partially existing in what we might call parallel realities. Our weapons cannot hit a target that is not entirely in our dimension. Vex watched in growing horror as the Reaper became completely transparent. The ship was still there, still visible, but somehow not quite real anymore. It was like trying to grab smoke with bare hands. Fire all weapons at the human ship, Vex ordered desperately. Every remaining Kethran vessel turned their weapons toward the ghostly Reaper. Thousands of energy beams and missiles struck the space where the human ship floated. But every attack passed harmlessly through the vessel, as if it were not there at all. Jake Morrison's voice came across the communication channels again, but now it seemed to come from everywhere at once, as if the human captain was speaking from multiple realities. You threatened human civilians, Admiral. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake was thinking that we built the Reaper with only 3 dimensions in mind. The ghostly human ship began to move through the Kethran fleet, passing through alien vessels like they were made of air. But as it moved, something terrible began to happen to the ships it touched. When the Reaper passed through a Kethran destroyer, the alien vessel simply stopped working. Its engines shut down, its weapons powered off, and its life support systems failed. The ship became a lifeless hulk floating in space. "How is it doing that?" Vex whispered. "Admiral," his science officer reported in a voice filled with terror. "When the human ship phases through our vessels, it is somehow disrupting their molecular structure from the inside. It is killing our ships from within." Jake's voice continued to echo through space. "The phase shift drive allows us to exist in multiple realities at once. We can attack you from dimensions you cannot even perceive. Every ship we touch will die, and there is nothing you can do to stop us." The Reaper continued its ghostly hunt through the alien fleet. Ship after ship fell silent as the human vessel passed through them, like a plague made of shadow and light. The aliens could not fight back, could not defend themselves, could not even run away fast enough. Admiral Vex realized that his fleet was being systematically executed. "All ships," he broadcast frantically. "Ram the human vessel. All ships at maximum speed. Even if we cannot hurt it with weapons, we can destroy it through collision." Thousands of Kethran ships turned toward the Reaper and accelerated to ramming speed. It was a desperate tactic, but Vex reasoned that even advanced human technology could not survive the impact of thousands of ships hitting it simultaneously. The alien vessels reached the Reaper's position and struck it from all directions at once. But instead of causing an explosion, the Kethran ships simply passed through the human vessel like it was made of mist. The aliens found themselves ramming empty space while the Reaper continued its work of destruction. "It is not working," Vex's tactical officer reported. "Our ships cannot make physical contact with the human vessel." "Then how do we fight something we cannot touch?" Vex demanded. "Admiral," came a small voice from his communication station, "I do not think we can." Vex stared at the tactical display showing his fleet. Red markers indicated dead ships, and the number was growing rapidly. The Reaper was systematically moving through his Armada, killing everything it touched. At this rate, his entire fleet would be destroyed within the hour. In desperation, he activated his most powerful weapon. The World Breaker had finished charging, and its targeting systems were locked onto the human colony of Terra Nova. "Human Captain," he broadcast, "I am firing on your colony world now. Even if you destroy my fleet, millions of your people will die." Admiral Vex pressed the firing button, sending a planet-killing beam of energy toward the helpless human world. But as the weapon fired, the ghostly Reaper suddenly appeared directly in front of the Kethran flagship. The human ship had somehow moved from the outer edge of the fleet to the center in an instant. Jake Morrison's voice came over the communication system one final time, and now it carried the promise of absolute destruction. "Admiral Vex, you just fired on human civilians. Now you get to learn what happens when you make humanity truly angry." The Reaper began to phase back into normal reality, but as it did so, something impossible happened. The human ship materialized partially inside the Kethran flagship, occupying the same space as the alien vessel's bridge. Admiral Vex found himself staring directly at a section of the Reaper's hull that had appeared in the middle of his command center. Through the transparent metal, he could see Captain Jake Morrison looking back at him with cold, merciless eyes. The human captain raised his hand and placed it on what appeared to be a weapon control panel. Vex realized with absolute terror that the Reaper's main gun was now inside his ship, pointed directly at him. "Goodbye, Admiral," Jake said quietly. The entropy cannon fired at point-blank range inside the Kethran flagship. Admiral Vex had one brief moment to understand what was happening before his molecules simply stopped holding together. The bridge, the command crew, and the Admiral himself dissolved into harmless atoms that scattered into space. The Reaper phased back to normal reality, leaving behind a massive hole where the flagship's command center used to be. The mighty Dominator, pride of the Kethran fleet, died instantly as its main power systems failed, and its hull cracked open like an egg. Across the alien Armada, thousands of ship captains watched their command vessel break apart. The sight broke, something fundamental in the Kethran fleet. Admiral Vex had been more than just their commander. He had been their symbol of invincibility. Now he was dead, killed by a human who had materialized inside his own ship like a ghost. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Reaper, watching the chaos spreading through the enemy fleet. Ships were breaking formation, some trying to flee while others fired randomly into space. The proud Kethran Armada was falling apart as panic replaced discipline. "Ghost," Jake said calmly. "How many ships remain?" "Approximately 43,000 vessels are still operational," the AI replied. "However, their command structure has collapsed. Individual captains are making independent decisions without coordination." Jake nodded. The death of Admiral Vex had been necessary, but now came the most important part of the battle. It was not enough to simply win. He had to send a message that would prevent future attacks on human space. "Open a communication channel to all remaining Kethran ships," he ordered. "Channel open, Captain." Jake's voice reached every alien vessel in the system. When he spoke, there was no anger in his tone, no hatred. There was something far more frightening, the calm certainty of absolute victory. "Kethran Fleet, this is Captain Morrison. Your admiral is dead. Your flagship is destroyed. You came here with 100,000 ships, and now fewer than half remain. You have a choice to make." On dozens of alien bridges, ship captains listened, with growing fear. Some had already begun charging their hyperspace drives, desperate to escape the system. Others sat frozen, waiting to hear what the terrifying human would say next. "I am going to allow some of you to leave," Jake continued. "Not all of you. That would send the wrong message. But enough to carry word back to your empire about what happened here." A Kethran captain named Drex, now the senior surviving officer, in the fleet, found his voice. "Human, what do you want from us?" Jake's reply was immediate. "I want you to understand what you faced here today. You did not lose this battle because of bad luck or poor planning. You lost because you fundamentally misunderstood what humans are." The Reaper began moving slowly through the scattered alien fleet. Ships moved aside like frightened animals, unwilling to risk drawing the attention of the deadly human vessel. "Your intelligence reports told you that humans were a peaceful species," Jake said. "Young, primitive, weak. You were wrong on all counts. We are not peaceful. We have simply chosen to restrain ourselves because we thought it was better for the galaxy." On his bridge, Captain Drex checked his sensors and felt his blood turn cold. The human ship was heading directly toward his vessel. "Human captain, we surrender. We will leave your system immediately." "I know you will," Jake replied. "But first you need to understand what you are surrendering to." The Reaper stopped directly in front of Drex's ship. At this close range, the alien captain could see details of the human vessel that had been invisible from a distance. The hull was covered in weapon ports that looked like nothing in any database. Strange energy patterns flowed across its surface like living things. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Ghost," Jake said quietly. "Show them the manufacturing bay." A section of the Reaper's hull became transparent, revealing the interior of the ship. Captain Drex gasped as he saw massive machines working at incredible speed, building new drones and weapons from raw materials. In the time he watched, dozens of new fighter craft were assembled and launched. "The Reaper is not just a warship," Jake explained. "It is a mobile factory capable of building an entire fleet. If I chose to, I could stay in this system and construct enough ships to conquer your entire empire." The alien captain stared at the impossible technology. "How long would that take?" he whispered. "Approximately 6 months," Jake replied matter-of-factly. "But that would be wasteful. I prefer to solve problems efficiently." The Reaper moved away from Drex's ship and began systematically destroying other vessels in the fleet. But Jake was not killing randomly. He was carefully selecting which ships to destroy and which to spare, creating a specific pattern that would maximize the psychological impact. "I am destroying your largest and most powerful vessels," Jake announced. "Your battleships, carriers, and heavy cruisers will not return home. Only your smaller ships will survive to carry my message. Captain Drex watched in helpless horror as the human ship methodically hunted down the fleet's capital ships. Each attack was swift and precise. The Reaper would phase into normal space, fire a single shot, and watch another massive alien warship dissolve into atoms. "Why are you doing this?" Drex demanded. "We already surrender." Jake's voice carried across space with the weight of absolute authority. "Because your empire needs to understand the difference between defeating humans and making humans angry. Today you made us angry." The systematic destruction continued for another hour. When it was finished, exactly 1,000 Kethran ships remained out of the original 100,000. They were all small vessels, scouts, frigates, and light cruisers. Nothing that could threaten a human colony, but enough to carry survivors back to Kethran space. "Captain Drex," Jake said, addressing the alien directly, "you are now in command of the survivors. You will return to your empire and deliver my message exactly as I give it to you." "I will do as you command," Drex replied, his voice shaking. "Tell your leaders that humans are not the peaceful traitors they believed us to be. We are a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare against our own kind. Every weapon we build is designed to fight enemies stronger, faster, and more numerous than ourselves." Jake paused, letting his words sink in. "Tell them that the Reaper is not our most powerful ship. It is simply the only one we thought necessary to send against your fleet. Tell them that Earth has dozens of ships like this one and hundreds more under construction." This was not entirely true, but the aliens did not need to know that. Fear would accomplish what treaties could not. "Tell them that if they attack human colonies again, we will not send a single ship to fight them. We will come with our entire fleet, and we will not stop until their empire is nothing but empty space and bad memories." Captain Drex felt sick as he imagined what dozens of ships like the Reaper could do to his homeworlds. "Human captain, surely we can reach some kind of agreement. The Kethran Empire does not wish to be your enemy." "That is exactly the message I wanted you to take home," Jake replied. "The choice is yours. Leave us alone and we will leave you alone. Attack us again, and learn what happens when humanity decides that restraint is no longer necessary." The surviving Kethran ships began activating their hyperspace drives, desperate to escape the system. But before they could jump, Jake had one final message. "Captain Drex, there is one more thing your empire needs to know. Today, you faced one human defending one colony. We have thousands of colonies scattered across the galaxy and millions of humans willing to defend them. If your empire is thinking about testing our resolve elsewhere, remember what happened here." The alien captain nodded frantically. "I will remember, human captain. My empire will remember." "See that they do," Jake said simply. The 1,000 surviving Kethran ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying with them recordings of the battle and the terrifying knowledge that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Jake Morrison stood alone on the bridge of the Reaper, watching the empty space where the alien fleet had been. The immediate threat was over, but he knew this was just the beginning. Word of the battle would spread across the galaxy, and humanity would face new challenges. "Ghost," he said quietly. "Set course for Terra Nova. Let's make sure the colonists are safe." "Course laid in, Captain. Estimated arrival time is 2 hours." As the Reaper moved toward the human colony, Jake reflected on what he had accomplished. He had won an impossible battle and sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. Humanity was no longer the weak, peaceful species that others could prey upon. They were predators pretending to be sheep, and today the pretense had ended. The galaxy would never be the same. The alarm bell rang through the dark corridors of Mining Station Delta 7. Captain Jake Morrison rolled out of his narrow bunk and grabbed his worn uniform jacket. The red emergency lights painted everything the color of blood as he ran toward the command center. "What's the situation, Tom?" Morrison asked his weapons officer. Tom Hayes looked up from his screen with worried eyes. "Long-range sensors picked up something big, Captain. Really big. It's moving toward the inner systems." Morrison studied the data on the main screen. The object was massive, bigger than anything he had seen in his 20 years of military service. It was still far away, but it was definitely heading toward Earth. Any word from the Council fleet? Morrison asked. Nothing yet, sir. They're probably having another meeting about it, Hayes said with disgust. Morrison understood his anger. The Galactic Council loved to talk and argue while real threats got closer every day. They had rules for everything: how to fight, when to fight, and most importantly, when not to fight. Humans were supposed to follow these rules if they wanted to stay in the Council. But Morrison remembered the old days, before the aliens came, before Earth joined the galaxy, when humans fought their own wars with their own rules. He walked to the window and looked out at the asteroid field. Somewhere out there, hidden between the rocks, was the UES Reaper, the ship that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Tom, send a message to Admiral Blake on Earth. Tell him the Watchers are awake. Hayes nodded and started typing. He knew what the message meant. They all did. The Reaper had been built in secret 15 years ago, just after Earth joined the Galactic Council. The Council had made Earth destroy most of its warships. They said human weapons were too violent, too dangerous for a peaceful galaxy. But some people in Earth's government were smarter than the Council thought. They built 12 prototype ships in hidden locations throughout human space. Ships that used the old human way of fighting. Ships built to kill, not to make friends. Morrison had commanded one of Earth's defense cruisers during the integration wars. He had seen how the Council fought their battles. Clean, precise, limited. They would fire a few shots, accept surrender, and move on. It was civilized warfare. It was also weak. The Council species thought humans were useful but harmless. Good engineers and miners, but not real warriors. The reptilian Vorth, who controlled most of the Council's military, laughed at human battle reports. They said humans were too emotional to be good soldiers. Morrison knew better. He had fought alongside humans who died to protect their ships. He had seen human engineers fix weapons while under fire. He had watched human pilots ram their fighters into enemy ships to save their friends. The Council called it primitive. Morrison called it effective. His communicator buzzed. Admiral Blake's voice came through the static. Jake, we need to talk. Can you use the secure channel? Morrison walked to his private office and activated the encryption system. Blake's tired face appeared on the small screen. Admiral, you look like hell, Morrison said. Blake rubbed his eyes. Jake, that thing on your sensors isn't alone. We're tracking at least 200 similar objects moving toward the outer rim worlds. The Council's science division thinks they're ships. What kind of ships? The kind that don't answer communication. Attempts. The kind that destroyed the Centauri colony last week. Morrison felt ice in his stomach. Centauri had 50,000 people. Any survivors? None. The colony is just gone. Nothing left but ash and metal. Blake leaned forward on the screen. Jake, the Council fleet is mobilizing, but their response time is terrible. They want to form committees and study the threat. Meanwhile, these things are getting closer to Earth every day. What do you need from me, Admiral? I need you to wake up the Reaper. I need you to get her ready for war. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Activating the Reaper would break every treaty Earth had signed with the Council. It would mean the end of his military career. It might mean the end of Earth's membership in the galactic community, but it might also mean the difference between Earth's survival and Earth's destruction. How long do we have? Morrison asked. The Council's best guess is 3 weeks before they reach the outer colonies, 5 weeks before they reach Earth. I'll need all 12 of my crew back on station. They're already on their way. Jake, the Council can't know about this. If they find out we kept the prototypes, they'll kick Earth out of the Alliance. And if we don't use them, there might not be an Earth left to kick out. Blake nodded grimly. That's exactly right. Good luck, Captain. Earth is counting on you. The transmission ended, leaving Morrison alone with his thoughts. Through his window, he could see the running lights of a transport ship approaching the station. His crew was coming home. Morrison had served with these people for over a decade. They were the misfits and troublemakers of the Earth Defense Force. Too aggressive for the new diplomatic fleet, too independent for Council oversight, too human for a sanitized galaxy. Lisa Park, his chief engineer, who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. Rick Stone, his navigator, who could plot a course through an asteroid field while half asleep. Dan Wells, his communications officer, who spoke 17 alien languages but preferred to communicate with his fists. And 9 others like them. Veterans of the old Earth military who remembered when humans fought to win, not to follow rules. The transport docked with a metallic clang. Morrison heard boots in the corridor and familiar voices arguing about something unimportant. His crew was home. Hayes appeared in the doorway. "Captain, they're all here. Park wants to know if we're finally going to fire up the big guns." Morrison stood up and straightened his uniform. It was time to tell them the truth. The crew gathered in the station's small meeting room. 12 faces looked at him with mixture of curiosity and excitement. They all knew why they were here, but they wanted to hear him say it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison began, "for the past 15 years we've been babysitting the most dangerous warship ever built by human hands. We've kept her systems maintained, her weapons calibrated, and her AI sleeping. Today, that changes." He activated the main screen, showing the sensor data from the approaching fleet. "Something is coming. Something that has already destroyed an entire colony. The Council fleet will try to stop it using their rules and their politics and their careful strategies. They will fail." Park leaned forward. "So we're going to stop it using our rules?" Morrison smiled for the first time in weeks. "We're going to stop it using no rules at all. We're going to fight like humans used to fight. Like we were born to fight." He looked at each of their faces. "This will probably end our careers. It might end our lives. It will definitely make us enemies of people who used to be our allies. Anyone who wants to transfer to a safe posting can do so now, no questions asked." No one moved. Stone spoke up from the back. "Captain, with respect, we've been waiting 15 years for this conversation. We didn't stay here to play it safe." The others nodded agreement. Morrison felt something he hadn't felt since the old days. Pride in his crew, pride in his species, and underneath it all, a cold anticipation that made his blood sing. "All right then, let's go wake up the Reaper." As they prepared to leave the station, Morrison took one last look at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, an alien fleet was approaching with the intention of destroying everything humans had built. They were about to learn that humans built more than cities and farms. They built monsters. And now it was time to let the monsters hunt. The shuttle moved slowly through the asteroid field, its lights cutting through the darkness. Captain Morrison sat in the pilot's seat, carefully steering between the floating rocks. Behind him, his 12 crew members were silent, each lost in their own thoughts. "There," said Rick Stone, pointing ahead. "Grid reference Alpha 7. Morrison looked where Stone was pointing. At first he saw nothing but more asteroids. Then his eyes adjusted, and he saw it. A massive shape hidden in the shadow of a giant rock. The UES Reaper. Even in the darkness, the ship looked deadly. It was longer than 3 football fields and covered in weapon ports. Unlike the smooth, elegant ships the Council preferred, the Reaper looked like what it was. A machine built for war. "She's beautiful," whispered Lisa Park. Morrison smiled. Park had helped design the ship's engines 15 years ago. She knew every bolt and wire in the massive vessel. The shuttle docked with a soft bump. Morrison led his crew through the airlock and into the ship's corridors. Emergency lighting came on automatically, casting red shadows on the walls. The Reaper felt different from Council ships. The corridors were wider to allow for damage control teams. The walls were thicker for protection. Everything was built to survive battle, not to look pretty. "Park, get to engineering and start the main reactor," Morrison ordered. "Stone, check navigation systems. Hayes, I want all weapon systems online in 4 hours." His crew scattered to their stations. Morrison walked to the bridge alone. The command center was dark and quiet. He sat in the captain's chair and placed his hand on the control panel. Lights began to flicker on around the bridge. "Computer, this is Captain Morrison. Authorization Omega 77, a calm female voice answered. Authorization confirmed. Welcome back, Captain. I am ERA's Advanced Reconnaissance and Engagement System. All primary systems are in standby mode. Eras. What's our current status? Reactor offline, weapons offline, life support at minimum levels. Shall I begin full activation sequence? Morrison hesitated. Once Ares was fully active, there would be no hiding the ship from Council sensors. They would be committed to this path. His communicator buzzed. Admiral Blake's voice was urgent. Jake, we just lost contact with the Henderson colony. That's 3 colonies in 2 days. Whatever these things are, they're not slowing down. Morrison closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and spoke clearly. Ares, begin full activation. Priority 1 alert status. Understood, Captain. Beginning startup sequence now. The ship came alive around him. Lights brightened, ventilation systems hummed to life, and he could feel the deck vibrating as massive systems powered up throughout. The vessel, deep in the ship's core, the fusion reactor ignited. The Reaper had enough fuel to fight for months without stopping. Its weapons were powered by the same technology that lit Earth's cities. Park's voice came over the intercom. Captain, main power is stable. We're at 60% and climbing. Good. Work, Lisa. How long until we can move? Give me 30 minutes for the engines, but Captain, some of these systems haven't been tested in 15 years. I can't guarantee everything will work perfectly. Nothing ever works perfectly in war, Morrison replied. Do your best. On the main screen, Morrison watched as his crew brought the ship online. Status lights changed from red to yellow to green. Weapon systems that could destroy entire cities were now ready for battle. Hayes reported from the weapons control room. Captain, all missile tubes loaded, railguns charged, nuclear, warheads armed and ready. Stone's voice came from navigation. Jump drive calibrated. I can get us anywhere in the system in under 10 minutes. Morrison nodded. The Reaper wasn't just a warship. It was the most advanced warship humans had ever built. It could appear anywhere in the solar system without warning. It could strike targets from impossible distances, and it carried enough firepower to level continents. The Council had banned such weapons after Earth joined the galactic community. They said no civilized species needed such destructive capability. But the things approaching Earth weren't civilized. AREs spoke again. Captain, I am detecting multiple transmissions from Council Fleet Command. They are reporting contact with the unknown vessels. Put it on speaker. The bridge filled with panicked voices from Council ships. Morrison heard battle reports in a dozen alien languages, all saying the same thing. The enemy was bigger than expected, stronger than expected, and completely without mercy. Council Cruiser Harmony, this is Fleet Command. Report your status. Static. Filled the channel for several seconds. Then a weak voice answered. Fleet Command, the Harmony is gone. They don't just destroy ships, they consume them. The hull, the crew, everything, it's like they're eating our vessels. Morrison felt cold. These weren't just aggressive aliens. They were something much worse. Captain, Ares said quietly. Based on the battle reports, I estimate the Council fleet has lost 30% of its strength in the first engagement. The Council had started with 200 ships. If they had lost 60 vessels in one battle, the enemy was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Admiral Blake's face appeared on Morrison's personal communicator. The Admiral looked exhausted and scared. Jake, it's worse than we thought. These things, the survivors are calling them devourers. They don't want to conquer territory or negotiate treaties. They just want to consume everything in their path. How many ships are we facing? Our best count is over 200. Maybe more. And Jake, they're not just ships. They're alive somehow. Part machine, part organic. They heal damage by consuming matter around them. Morrison stared at the data Blake was sending. The enemy vessels were massive. Some were larger than Earth's biggest space stations, and they were all heading directly toward the inner planets. What's the Council's plan? Morrison asked. Blake laughed bitterly. They want to form a committee to study the threat. They're talking about sending a diplomatic mission to establish communication while these things eat their way through human space. Exactly. Jake, the Earth Defense Fleet is moving to intercept the enemy at Jupiter. 30 ships against over 200. It's going to be a massacre. Morrison understood. Earth's official military followed council rules. They would fight bravely and honorably and die pointlessly because they weren't allowed to fight dirty. How long until the Earth fleet engages the enemy? 6 hours. Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew was ready. His ship was armed and dangerous. And somewhere beyond Jupiter, an alien fleet was approaching that wanted to consume every living thing in the solar system. Ares, plot a course for the Jupiter intercept point. Maximum speed. Captain, at maximum speed we will arrive before the Earth defense fleet. You will be alone against over 200 enemy vessels. Morrison smiled grimly. That's exactly what I'm counting on. The Earth fleet fights like the Council taught them. We're going to fight like humans. Park's voice came over the intercom. Captain, engines are ready. We can jump whenever you give the order, Hayes added. All weapons show green. We're loaded for bear, sir, Stone reported. Navigation locked on target, ready to jump on your command. Morrison stood up from his chair. Around him, the bridge hummed with power. The Reaper was awake and hungry for battle. Ares, are you ready for combat? Captain, all systems are optimal. However, I must point out that the odds against us are approximately 200 to 1. Good, Morrison said. Then it's a fair fight. He activated the ship-wide intercom. All hands, this is the captain. In 5 minutes, we're going to jump into the middle of the largest space battle in human history. The enemy thinks they can consume our world because they've beaten everyone else they've encountered. They're about to learn that they've never fought humans before. He paused, looking at the faces of his crew on the monitor screens throughout the ship. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten Earth. We're going to show the galaxy what humans can do when we stop playing by other people's rules. And we're going to remind everyone why humans were the apex predators on their own world. Morrison sat back down and gripped the arms of his chair. Ares, initiate jump. Target, Jupiter intercept point. All weapons hot. Jump initiated. Time to target, 30 seconds. The stars outside began to blur as the Reaper tore through space, toward its destiny. Behind them, the asteroid field fell away. Ahead of them waited an enemy that had consumed 17 galaxies, but they had never consumed a galaxy protected by humans. The Reaper disappeared into hyperspace, carrying 12 angry humans toward the fight of their lives. The Reaper dropped out of hyperspace like a ghost appearing from nowhere. Captain Morrison stared at the main screen and felt his blood turn cold. The space around Jupiter was filled with alien ships. Massive, twisted things that looked more like living creatures than machines. Their hulls pulsed with strange lights and tentacle-like appendages reached out from their sides. Some were the size of city blocks. Others were as large as Manhattan. My God, whispered Rick Stone from his navigation station. Morrison had seen many alien ships during his years of service, but nothing like these. The Devourers looked hungry. They moved through space like sharks swimming through dark water, searching for prey. Ares, give me a count, Morrison ordered. I detect 214 hostile vessels, Captain. They are arranged in a loose formation approximately 50,000 kilometers ahead of our position. Hayes looked up from his weapons console. Captain, they haven't seen us yet. We dropped out behind that gas cloud. We have maybe 2 minutes before they detect us. Morrison studied the enemy formation. The Devourers were spread out across a huge area of space, moving slowly toward the inner planets. They weren't expecting trouble. They had probably never faced real resistance before. That was about to change. All hands. Battle stations, Morrison announced over the ship's intercom. This is not a drill. We are about to engage 200 enemy vessels. We will hit them hard, hit them fast, and keep hitting them until they're all dead. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the ship. Morrison could hear his crew running to their positions, their boots echoing through the corridors. Captain, Stone said nervously, shouldn't we wait for the Earth Defense Fleet? They'll be here in 4 hours. Morrison shook his head. In 4 hours, these things will be past Jupiter and heading for Mars. We stop them here, or Earth dies. Turned to Hayes. Tom, load all missile tubes. I want nuclear warheads in the first salvo. Sir, the Council banned nuclear weapons in space combat. The Council isn't here. Morrison cut him off. And these things just ate 3 human colonies. Load the nukes. Hayes nodded and began entering commands. All around the ship, missile tubes opened and armed themselves with weapons that could crack moons. Park's voice came over the intercom from engineering. "Captain, all systems show green. Engines at full power. We're ready for anything." Morrison gripped the arms of his chair. "Ares, take us in. Full speed straight at the center of their formation. Captain, that is suicide. We cannot survive a direct assault against such numbers." "We're not trying to survive, Ares. We're trying to kill as many of them as possible before they know what hit them." The Reaper shot forward like a bullet. The ship was built for speed as well as firepower, and it covered the distance to the enemy fleet in less than 3 minutes. The first Devourer ship to detect them was a medium-sized vessel with writhing tentacles along its sides. It began to turn toward the Reaper, moving slowly like a giant beast waking up. It never got the chance to fully turn. "Fire all missiles," Morrison ordered. 40 nuclear missiles erupted from the Reaper's launch tubes. They streaked across space like angry stars and slammed into the Devourer ship. The explosions were brilliant white flashes that lit up the darkness. When the light faded, the enemy ship was gone. Nothing remained but glowing debris. "First kill," Hayes reported with grim satisfaction. But the other Devourers were waking up now. They turned toward the Reaper like a pack of wolves focusing on a single sheep. Energy beams began to lance out from their weapons, filling space with deadly light. "Evasive maneuvers," Morrison commanded. Stone threw the ship into a spinning dive. That would have torn apart a normal vessel. But the Reaper was built to withstand incredible stress. It twisted through space like a dancer, avoiding the enemy fire. "Railguns, target the big one on our starboard side," Morrison ordered. The ship's main weapons were massive electromagnetic cannons that fired metal slugs at incredible speed. 3 railgun rounds hit the targeted Devourer ship, punching through, its hull like bullets through paper. The alien vessel shuddered and began to leak atmosphere. But it didn't die. As Morrison watched in horror, the holes in the ship's hull began to close. The Devourer was healing itself by consuming nearby space. "Debris? They can repair damage," Morrison said. "Ares, update combat protocols. We need to hit them hard enough that they can't regenerate." "Understood, Captain," switching to maximum firepower mode. The Reaper dove into the heart of the enemy formation. Morrison's ship was outnumbered 200 to 1, but it had advantages the Devourers didn't expect. It was fast. While the alien ships lumbered through space like giant whales, the Reaper darted between them like a minnow. It would appear next. To an enemy vessel, unleash devastating firepower, then disappear before they could respond. It was smart. Ares calculated the best targets and attack patterns in milliseconds. The ship struck at weak points, exploited gaps in the enemy formation, and used the Devourer's own size against them, and it was utterly without mercy. Morrison's crew fought like demons. Hayes coordinated attacks that would have horrified Council observers. When a Devourer ship was damaged, the Reaper would finish it off immediately. When enemy vessels tried to retreat, they were hunted down and destroyed. There were no prisoners taken, no quarter given. "Target that cluster of ships near the gas giant's moon," Morrison ordered. "Use the proximity mines." The Reaper fired a spread of mines that attached themselves to asteroids near the enemy ships. When the Devourers moved closer to investigate, the mines exploded simultaneously. 4 alien vessels were caught in the blast and torn apart. But the enemy was learning too. The Devourers began to work together, using their superior numbers to trap the human ship. Energy beams converged on the Reaper from multiple directions. "Hull breach on Deck 7, Park reported. "Emergency bulkheads are holding, but we've lost atmosphere in 3 compartments." "Casualty report?" Morrison asked. 2 dead, 5 wounded. Medical teams are responding." Morrison felt each death like a punch to the gut, but he couldn't let emotion cloud his judgment. His crew was dying, but they were taking dozens of enemy ships with them. "Stone, get us out of this crossfire. Jump us to the outer edge of their formation." The ship vanished in a flash of light and reappeared 5,000 kilometers away. Before the Devourers could react, the Reaper launched another nuclear missile barrage. This time, Morrison targeted the largest enemy vessel, a monstrous ship that looked like a mechanical squid crossed with a building. The nuclear explosions tore through its hull, and this time the damage was too severe to heal. The giant ship broke apart in a series of secondary explosions. "That's their command ship," Ares reported. "The other vessels are showing signs of confusion." Morrison smiled grimly. Without their leader, the Devourer fleet was becoming disorganized. Some ships were retreating, others were advancing randomly, and a few had stopped moving entirely. "Now, we press the advantage," Morrison said. "All weapons, continuous fire. Don't give them time to reorganize." The Reaper began a deadly dance through the enemy formation. It would appear, strike, and vanish before the Devourers could respond. Each attack destroyed one or more enemy ships. The alien fleet, which had seemed invincible just an hour ago, was being torn apart by a single human vessel. But the ship was paying a price. The Reaper's hull was scarred by energy beams. Several weapon systems were offline. The crew was exhausted from constant battle. "Captain," Park called from engineering, "I'm reading massive structural stress throughout the ship. We can't keep this up much longer." Morrison checked his tactical display. They had destroyed over 60 enemy ships, but more than 150 were still active. And now those ships were beginning to coordinate their attacks again. "Hayes, how many missiles do we have left?" 12 nuclear warheads, sir. Maybe 20 conventional missiles. Not enough to finish the job, Morrison realized, but maybe enough to cripple the enemy fleet before the Earth Defense Force arrived. "Ares, plot a course that takes us through the densest part of their formation. We're going to make our last missiles count." "Captain, such a course will place us in extreme danger. We may not survive." Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew was battered but determined. They knew the odds, but they weren't backing down. "Ares, we're humans. Extreme danger is where we do our best work." The ship turned toward the heart of the enemy fleet, ready for one final desperate assault. Behind them floated the wreckage of 60 alien vessels. Ahead waited the survivors, angry and focused on revenge. The dance of death was about to reach its climax. The Reaper shuddered as another energy beam hit its port side. Captain Morrison gripped his chair as sparks flew from damaged control panels around the bridge. "Hull breach on deck 4, Park's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're losing. Atmosphere fast." Morrison looked at his tactical display. The numbers were grim. Over half his crew was dead or wounded. Primary weapons were failing. The ship's hull had more holes than solid metal, but they had destroyed 73 enemy ships. "Captain," Stone called from his navigation station, "the remaining Devourers are surrounding us. They're not giving us room to maneuver anymore." Morrison studied the enemy formation. The aliens had learned from their losses. Instead of chasing the Reaper around like angry wasps, they were now moving in coordinated groups. Every time Morrison's ship appeared somewhere, enemy vessels were already waiting. "They're boxing us in," Hayes said grimly. "Smart bastards." "How many missiles left?" Morrison asked. 8 nuclear warheads, 6 conventional." Morrison did the math in his head. 14 missiles against 141 enemy ships. Not good odds, even for humans. "Ares, can we still use the jump drive?" "Jump drive is functional, but power levels are at 30%. I estimate we have enough energy for perhaps 6 more jumps before the system fails." Morrison nodded. 6 jumps. 14 missiles. And an enemy that was getting smarter every minute. "Time for a new strategy. Stone, I want you to plot 6 jump coordinates. Make them random. Asteroid fields, near Jupiter's moons, behind gas clouds. Anywhere we can hide for a few seconds." "Sir, random jumps are dangerous. If we appear inside an asteroid..." "If we don't take risks, we're dead anyway," Morrison interrupted. "Plot the coordinates." While Stone worked, Morrison activated the ship-wide intercom. His voice echoed through the damaged corridors where his surviving crew members were fighting fires and sealing hull breaches. "All hands. This is the captain. We've hurt them bad, but they're not giving up. Neither are we. We're going to start jumping around the system like ghosts. Hit and run, appear and disappear. Make them think we're everywhere at once." He paused, listening to the sounds of his dying ship. "Park, I need everything you can give me from the engines. Hayes, make every shot count. Stone, keep us moving. We're going to show these aliens what happens when humans get desperate." The first jump took them to the asteroid field near Europa. The Reaper appeared between two large rocks, immediately launched 4 missiles at a group of Devourer ships, then vanished before the enemy could return fire. The second jump put them near Io's volcanic surface. The ship used the moon's gravity to slingshot toward another group of enemies, destroyed 2 ships with railgun fire, then jumped away as energy beams lit up the space where they had been. The third jump was behind Jupiter's largest moon. Morrison waited until a patrol of Devourer ships passed by, then struck from behind. 3 more enemy vessels died before they knew what hit them. "Captain," Ares reported, "the enemy is becoming frustrated. They are spreading their ships throughout the system to try to intercept us." "Good," Morrison said. "When they spread out, they're easier to kill individually." But the strategy was taking its toll on the Reaper. Each jump drained more power. Each battle caused more damage. Morrison could feel his ship dying around him. "Engineering to bridge." Park's voice was strained. "Captain, the jump drive is overheating. If we keep pushing it like this, it's going to explode." "How many more jumps can we make?" 2, maybe 3 if we're lucky." Morrison looked at his tactical display. They had reduced the enemy fleet to about 120 ships, but the Reaper was falling apart. Whole sections of the ship were without power. Life support was failing in several compartments. "Stone, where's the Earth Defense Fleet?" "Still, 2 hours out, sir. They're moving as fast as they can, but they would arrive too late," Morrison realized. The Devourers would have time to regroup and prepare for the Earth ships. The battle would be a massacre, unless the Reaper could do something dramatic in the next 2 hours. Morrison studied the enemy positions. Most of the Devourer ships were now scattered throughout the outer system, hunting for his ship. But about 30 of the largest vessels had gathered near Jupiter itself, probably waiting to see where he would appear next. An idea began to form in Morrison's mind. A terrible, desperate idea. "Ares, show me Jupiter's atmospheric composition." "Captain, Jupiter is primarily hydrogen and helium, with traces of methane and ammonia. The atmospheric pressure increases dramatically toward the core. What would happen if we detonated all our remaining nuclear warheads in Jupiter's upper atmosphere?" Ares was quiet for several seconds. "The explosion would be significant. The nuclear fusion would trigger a chain reaction in the hydrogen-rich atmosphere. The blast would be visible from Earth." Hayes looked up from his weapons console. "Captain, are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" Morrison nodded grimly. "We're going to turn Jupiter into a bomb." Stone stared at him. "Sir, that's insane. The explosion could destroy everything within 50,000 kilometers, including us, including those 30 Devourer ships camping near Jupiter," Morrison pointed out. "And it will send a message to the rest of them." Park's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, even if we survive the initial blast, the radiation will kill us within hours." Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew was exhausted, wounded, and scared. But they weren't backing down. They knew what was at stake. "I'm not ordering anyone to do this," Morrison said quietly. "We can try to run, jump to the outer system and wait for the Earth fleet. Maybe some of us will survive." Hayes laughed bitterly. "And let those things eat our families while we hide behind asteroids? Not a chance, Captain." Stone nodded agreement. "My sister lives on Mars. If we don't stop these bastards here, she's dead anyway." Park's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, the crew has voted. We're with you. Let's light up Jupiter like a Christmas tree." Morrison felt a surge of pride in his people. Humans facing impossible odds, choosing to fight rather than flee. This was what made his species special. "All right then, Stone. Plot a jump that puts us right in Jupiter's upper atmosphere. Hayes, program all nuclear warheads to detonate simultaneously. Park, give me everything the engines have got." As his crew prepared for their final gambit, Morrison opened a channel to Admiral Blake on Earth. "Admiral, this is Morrison. We've reduced the enemy fleet to about 120 ships, but the Reaper is finished. We're going to make one last strike that should take out another 30 or 40 of them." Blake's face appeared on the screen, and Morrison could see the man understood what he was really saying. "Jake, there has to be another way. Admiral, when the Earth Defense Fleet arrives, They'll be facing 80 ships instead of 200. That's the difference between victory and defeat. Between Earth surviving and Earth dying. Blake was quiet for a moment. Then he saluted. "It's been an honor serving with you, Captain." Morrison returned the salute. "Tell Earth that humans don't go quietly into the dark." He closed the channel and turned to his crew. "Final jump in 30 seconds. All hands, brace for impact." Tadai. Reaper began to vibrate as its damaged systems prepared for one last jump. Around Jupiter, 30 massive devourer ships waited in formation, unaware that death was about to fall from the sky. "Jump drive charged," Stone reported. "All warheads. Armed," Hayes confirmed. "Engines at maximum power," Park added. Morrison took a deep breath. "Ares, initiate final jump. Target, Jupiter's upper atmosphere. All weapons free." Jump initiated. Time to target, 10 seconds. The bridge lights dimmed as every remaining bit of power flowed to the jump drive. Outside the windows, the stars began to blur. "It's been an honor serving with you all," Morrison said to his crew. The Reaper vanished from normal space, carrying 12 determined humans toward their destiny among the clouds of Jupiter. Behind them, the wreckage of 73 alien ships drifted in the darkness. Ahead waited 30 more enemies and a gas giant full of explosive potential. The impossible stand was about to reach its fiery conclusion. The Reaper materialized in Jupiter's upper atmosphere like a falling star. Around the ship, thick clouds of hydrogen and helium swirled in massive storms that had raged for centuries. "Deploy all warheads," Captain Morrison ordered. Tom Hayes pressed the launch button with steady hands. 8 nuclear missiles shot out from the dying ship and spread throughout Jupiter's atmosphere. Each warhead was programmed to detonate in exactly 60 seconds. "Missiles away," Hayes reported. 60 seconds. "To detonation." Morrison looked at the main screen. 30 devourer ships floated in formation around Jupiter, their massive hulls dark against the planet's swirling clouds. They had detected the Reaper's arrival and were moving to attack. "They're coming for us," Rick Stone said from his navigation station. "Let them come," Morrison replied. "They're about to learn why you don't mess with humans." Energy beams lanced down from the alien ships, striking Jupiter's atmosphere around the Reaper, but the thick gases absorbed most of the damage. The human ship was protected by the very planet it was about to turn into a weapon. 30 seconds to detonation, Hayes announced. Morrison activated the ship-wide intercom one last time. "All hands, this is the captain. In 30 seconds, we're going to light the biggest fire in human history. It's been an honor fighting alongside you. Earth will remember what we did here." Through the ship's corridors, his surviving crew members braced themselves. Lisa Park held onto her engineering console as sparks flew around her. Stone gripped his navigation controls as the ship shook from enemy fire. Hayes kept his eyes on the countdown timer. 10 seconds, Hayes called out. Morrison watched the Devourer ships closing in. They were so close now that he could see the details of their twisted hulls. Tentacles and organic growths covered their surfaces like some nightmare, mixture of machine and beast. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The nuclear warheads detonated simultaneously throughout Jupiter's hydrogen-rich atmosphere. What happened next had never been seen before in the history of the galaxy. The hydrogen around each warhead ignited instantly, creating 8 miniature suns in Jupiter's clouds. But the chain reaction didn't stop there. The fusion spread outward, igniting more hydrogen, which ignited even more. Within seconds, half of Jupiter's upper atmosphere was burning. The explosion was beyond anything Morrison had imagined. A wave of nuclear fire swept outward from the planet's surface, moving faster than light itself. The 30 Devourer ships caught in the blast simply vanished, turned to atoms in the space of a heartbeat. The Reaper was caught at the edge of the firestorm. The ship's hull began to melt as temperatures reached millions of degrees. But somehow, impossibly, the vessel held together just long enough. "Emergency jump!" Morrison shouted over the roar of dying systems. "Get us out of here!" Stone's hands flew over his controls. The jump drive, already damaged beyond repair, gave one final burst of power. The Reaper vanished from Jupiter's burning atmosphere and reappeared in empty space 50,000 kilometers away. But the ship was finished. Hull breaches opened throughout the vessel. The engines went silent. Life support failed in section after section. Morrison looked back at Jupiter and gasped. The entire planet was glowing like a small star. The nuclear chain reaction had turned the gas giant into a fusion furnace that would burn for days. The light was so bright it hurt to look at directly. "My God," Stone whispered. "What have we done?" On the tactical display, Morrison could see the remaining Devourer ships throughout the solar system. They had stopped moving. For the first time since the battle began, the alien fleet seemed uncertain. Hayes managed a weak smile. "I think we got their attention, Captain." But the celebration was short-lived. Emergency alarms were sounding throughout the ship. Park's voice came over the intercom, strained and weak. "Captain, the reactor is going critical. We have maybe 10 minutes before total system failure." Morrison nodded grimly. He had expected this. The Reaper had given everything it had. Now it was dying, taking its crew with it. "All hands, abandon ship," Morrison ordered. "Get to the escape pods." "Sir," Hayes protested, "there are only 4 pods left. Most were destroyed in the battle." Morrison looked around his bridge. 12 crew members had started this mission. Now only 4 were still alive: himself, Hayes, Stone, and Park. The others had died fighting to save Earth. "Then we use what we have," Morrison said quietly. "Everyone to the escape pods, that's an order." "What about you, Captain?" Park asked over the intercom. Morrison smiled sadly. "Someone has to make sure the ship's computer core is destroyed. Can't let these aliens learn our secrets." He was lying, and they all knew it. Morrison was staying because a captain didn't abandon his ship. Even a dying ship. Especially a dying ship that had just saved Earth. "Captain," Hayes started to protest. "Go," Morrison said firmly. "That's a direct order. Get out of here while you still can." Reluctantly, his 3 surviving crew members made their way to the escape pods. Morrison heard them moving through the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the dying ship. Alone on the bridge, Morrison watched as the Earth Defense Fleet finally arrived at Jupiter. 30 pristine council ships dropped out of hyperspace and stopped in shock at what they saw. Jupiter was still burning. The gas giant had become a fusion reactor, casting light across the entire solar system, and scattered around it was the wreckage of 30 Devourer ships, reduced to glowing atoms. Admiral Blake's voice came over the communication system, filled with disbelief. "Jake, what did you do?" Morrison activated his personal communicator. "We showed them what happens when you threaten Earth, Admiral. The remaining Devourer ships are retreating. I count about 90 vessels heading back toward deep space. You destroyed over half their fleet with 1 ship?" "We destroyed them. With human determination," Morrison corrected. "The ship was just a tool." He watched as his escape pods launched from the Reaper, 3 small vehicles carrying his surviving crew toward the safety of the Earth fleet. They would live to tell the story of what happened here. "Jake, we're sending rescue ships." "No time, Admiral. The reactor is about to go critical. Get your ships clear." Morrison cut the communication link and sat back in his captain's chair. Around him, the bridge was dark except for the glow of Jupiter's burning atmosphere. The ship shuddered as internal explosions tore through its hull. He thought about Earth, safe now behind its wall of burning gas. He thought about his crew, alive because they had chosen to fight instead of flee. He thought about the Devourer fleet, running back to whatever dark corner of space they had come from. The main screen flickered to life one last time. Ares spoke, with her calm mechanical voice. "Captain, it has been an honor serving with you." "The honor was mine, Ares. You fought like a human today. Thank you, Captain. That is the greatest compliment I could receive." The screen went dark. Morrison closed his eyes and waited. The Reaper's reactor exploded like a small nova, visible from Mars. The ship that had defied impossible odds and saved Earth died as it had lived, in a blaze of glory that lit up the darkness. 3 weeks later, Admiral Blake stood in the congressional hearing room on Earth, facing questions about the unauthorized activation of the prototype warship. "Admiral," the council representative said coldly, Earth violated 17 treaties by deploying nuclear weapons in space. The UES Reaper used tactics that the galactic community considers war crimes. Blake looked at the alien diplomat with tired eyes. Counselor, that ship and its crew saved Earth from complete destruction. They faced odds of 200 to 1, and still found a way to win. By turning a planet into a weapon, the counselor replied. Such actions are barbaric. Blake stood up slowly. You want to know what's barbaric? Sitting in committee meetings while colonies burn, forming diplomatic missions to talk to enemies that eat everything in their path, following rules of civilized warfare against an enemy that has no civilization. He activated a holographic display showing the battle statistics. 12 humans in an obsolete prototype ship destroyed 124 alien vessels and saved a solar system. Your civilized fleet would have been slaughtered. The counselor was quiet for a moment. What Earth did was effective, Admiral, but it was also terrifying. The galaxy is not sure it wants humans as allies if this is how you fight wars. Blake smiled grimly. Then maybe the galaxy should make sure it never becomes our enemy. The hearing continued for hours, but the outcome was already decided. Earth would face sanctions. The remaining prototype ships would be inspected. Human military doctrine would be studied and criticized. But Earth was safe, and somewhere in the outer rim, the surviving devourer ships carried a message back to their masters. Humanity was not prey. 6 months later, Blake visited the memorial built at the coordinates where the Reaper had died. A simple marker floating in space, bearing the names of the 12 crew members who had given their lives. Captain Morrison, Blake said quietly, the galaxy thinks we're monsters now. They're probably right. He looked out at the stars where other threats were stirring in the darkness. But monsters are exactly what the universe needs sometimes, and we're very good at being monsters when we have to be. The memorial drifted silently through space, a reminder that humans would do whatever it took to protect their home, even if it meant becoming the thing that others feared most. The stars held many dangers, but now they knew that Earth held something more dangerous still, humans who refused to die quietly.